Going to visit Jacob now and then have you take.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Jacob Mirman, and as you can see, I was born in 1892. I was born in Riga, Latvia. I was the youngest of 12 children. My father's family was rather prominent. They owned a large granary, as a matter of fact. My mother's family was not so prominent. I had no formal education, but I was an inveterate reader all my life. Using an American terminology, you could call me an educated, self-taught man. One of the things I learned, besides speaking my native Yiddish, was I learned some English, some German, and some Polish. All skills that would be of benefit if you're working as a businessman in Riga. At the age of 15, I was in danger of being conscripted into the army. And so my family raised enough money to allow me to emigrate to America. Now this was not uncommon at the time. A lot of young men, usually Jewish, left Eastern Europe to come to America to avoid conscription into what seemed like the endless wars that were always going on in Europe at that time. And so I arrived in New York and started working in a series of grocery stores. And I met Anna. Anna was working in a sweatshop on the Lower East Side, and we eventually married. I saved enough money that I could open my own grocery store. Most of my customers were immigrants and very, very poor. And so I made the conscious decision to accept IOUs in lieu of cash when they needed much needed groceries. From the moral and charitable standpoint, I think you will admit that was an admirable thing to do. From the business standpoint, it was catastrophic because none of them could ever pay back the IOUs, and so I lost the grocery store. So we picked up and moved all the way west to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where I got a job in a factory. I didn't especially like factory work very much, and so when an opportunity arose for something different, we jumped at it, and we moved here to Wausau. The opportunity was that one of my sisters had also emigrated, and she had married a man named Sam Deutsch, who ran a broom factory here in Wausau. And so we settled into Wausau, and I began working for my brother-in-law, usually in sales. And I'd travel all over the state of Wisconsin, delivering brooms and taking orders. And we also started a family. We had 2 sons, Ben and Ralph, both born here in Wausau. My wife was not too happy with my incessant traveling. She said it seemed like I was never home. And she finally argued me into her point of view. And so I quit the broom factory and opened a store. It was the Wausau New and Used Furniture Store. And it was located on First Street, right across from the library. Many of our customers at that time were first-generation Americans like myself. And in negotiating the sale or buying things of different items, they would many times, right in front of me, talk in their secret language, negotiating what they were going to do. And their secret language, of course, was their native tongue, usually either German or Polish. They did not realize I understood them. This did wonders for my business, believe me. We also started the practice of giving out little promotional gifts to loyal customers to encourage them to keep coming back. About this time, the federal government stepped in They decided that the local post office located on 4th Street was too small. They wanted to build a brand new post office, and the land that they were looking at just happened to be the land where our store was located. And so they built the new Federal Building. The Federal Building is called that because in the first floor it had the post office, the offices of the Internal Revenue Service, and upstairs the local Federal District Court. Taking the money that we got from that sale, we just moved down the street a little bit and built a new store at the corner of Washington and 2nd and changed the name to Mirman's, much catchier, I think. Initially, and we also stopped the used business and sold just primarily new furniture and also as a sideline, household appliances. Initially, I operated everything myself, but as Ralph grew up, he came in the business with me and we operated Mirman's together. My other son, Ben, had become a doctor and moved to California. Anecdotes about Mirman's. In 1949, Miss America came to Wausau, and she came to our store. Now, this is not too surprising because among her many other duties that year, Miss America was a spokesman for the Lane Cedar Chest Company. And they are makers of very high quality cedar chests, and we had little model cedar chests that we would give out as promotional gifts. So when Miss America came, we presented her with one of these little cedar chests, and we got our picture taken. Me, Ralph, and Miss America at Mirman's. And the picture was big enough news that it appeared in the local newspaper, the Wausau Daily Record Herald. Needless to say, that was pretty good advertising for us, too. As the years went by, we eventually expanded into the basement of the store, putting more sales area down there and hiring more employees. And when that was finished, I have a photograph of all our employees at that time. It's at home. And if you look very closely, at one end, a very young man as one of our employees happens to be our present mayor.
Oh, really?
We lived in several residences in Wausau. Initially 2 houses on the west side before we moved here to the southeast side, where we moved into a house on the corner of Spurgeonetti and Weston, big white brick house. And we lived there a number of years before we moved down a few houses west on Weston to a newer house. Religion. I was always an active member of the Jewish community here in Wausau. In fact, I was a charter member of the Beth Israel Synagogue, and when it merged later with Mount Sinai, throughout my life I continued to be an active member of Mount Sinai. I was also an active member of the local Masonic Lodge, as were many businessmen and civic leaders in this community. Sadly, Anna passed away in 1962. Shortly thereafter, I remarried a woman named Florence from Chicago. We lived for a relatively short time together because in 1969, I too passed away. And after my death, Florence moved back to Chicago. Ralph continued to run Mirman's for many years, and I may say so very, very successfully. He finally permanently closed the doors on Mirman's store in 1995 with the opening of the new Wausau Center Mall. The other person buried here happens to be Ruth, and she is my son Ralph's dearly beloved wife. And that's the story of Mirman's.
Very good. Thank you.
Does anybody own a chest?
I do.
You do?
I got one for graduation.
All right. Two other groups. Everybody,
high school.
the last two groups,
Yeah.
every single